All right. For a moment here today, we're going to talk about social norms in Africa, and it's really generalized, right? Because Africa is so large, and you're going to find some different social norms, specifically in South Africa versus like in Egypt, right? Different extents of the continent. But we're going to look at generalities today. Now, some of these are a little bit different from what we have here in our American culture. But I also want you to keep in mind Hans Rosling's idea. If you find somebody in Africa that has a very similar income to what you have here in the United States, then your lives are going to be very, very similar. Okay, more similar than different. Okay, but there are some unique situations. We want to talk about those. Okay, so this again is if you're traveling to Africa, get an opportunity to travel to Africa. These could be some insights that would be useful to help you avoid some awkward situations. First one, what should you do if you're going to Africa? You should greet people. The social aspects of life is really important in Africa. Okay, social components. It's almost like that's priority number one, more than anything else. Right? If you're on the way to a meeting, you'll see this in a second, and you've got an appointment time, right? You've run into somebody on the way to that meeting. It's almost expected that relationship, you stopping, having a conversation, meeting the person's needs, is much more important than you getting to that appointment at that set time, right? Relationships trump everything else, okay? So one thing that I think I see more and more of, people wearing their headphones up and down the hallways, that's not going to fly, in the African culture, right? Because you're bypassing everybody, you're not really greeting anybody. You need to do a good job of greeting and being a social being. Different parts of the world, they have different types of greetings. In Africa, very similar to what we have here. United States, handshaking is preferred method of greeting someone. Okay. The second one, show respect to your elders. So, one way that you can see this is if you're eating a meal with a bunch of people, including yourself and other people from Africa, African families. It's priority to give the eldest an opportunity to go eat first. Right? They eat first before anybody else eats. Sound good? I'm not sure if we have that rule here in the United States. I tried to implement that in my house, my family, and I got shut down pretty quick there. So, eat your food with your right hand only. This one's really important. It applies not only to African cultures, but we'll see it in the Middle East. We'll see it in other parts of Asia as well. And there's a reason for it. Anybody know why you should not eat your food with your left hand as often? What's that? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's an idea. Are you left-handed? No. Okay. I'm left-handed. I have that problem. You have to sit in certain spots, otherwise it's uncomfortable. Yeah, Dylan? You're left-handed? You're left-handed? Okay. Well, you'd have to change your behavior if you happen to go to the Middle East, right? Or to Africa in this particular case. Here in the United States, we have certain expectations when it comes to restrooms. You go to the restroom, there's a toilet, there's toilet paper, there's a sink to wash your hands. Restroom facilities in other parts of the world, they don't have those default staples in them, okay? For example, what if there's no toilet paper, okay? What if there's no sink? So in that particular case, you revert to using your left hand for cleanliness and hygiene purposes, okay? So you can understand why, if you get to the table and you start digging in and touching all the food with your left hand, how everybody around that table is going to be, grossed out because of you touching. It's assumed that, you have used your left hand for hygiene purposes and then you're touching everybody's food with your left hand, okay? So don't, enact culture shock on everybody else by doing that, okay? So eat with your right hand only. Don't touch people with your left hand either. Okay? You can understand that. Hiss to grab one's attention. So this one, I don't imagine you'll be the one that's implementing it, but if you're in that social setting and you hear people hissing, you may be caught off guard a little bit. Okay? So this is common practice in a lot of African cultures. And instead of shouting out, hey, right, they just hiss at one another. And that's how you, again, get another person's attention.
Define hiss.
Like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, they'll either do that, or the alternative is like smacking one's lip, or they'll make a loud kissing sound with their lips. Yeah. And so for a lot of us in the American culture, you make it think of that as being like catcalling or like some type of flirtatious device or way of communicating. It's not that at all. It's really just about grabbing one's attention. Okay. You should be comfortable giving up one's personal space. Okay, your personal space. I've heard scenarios where you've got people from the American culture. They go there, they're riding on public transportation like a large bus. There's many seats available on the bus. The bus is almost empty. The person gets on the bus from the African culture and he sits right next to you. And you look around and you're like, there's so many other options that you could, choose. Why did you sit right next to me? You got to understand the context in which they live. A lot of the homes are very small and you have large families. So that means sleeping arrangements. A lot of times you're sleeping right next to somebody. Okay? And you do that over and over again, it becomes like a matter of comfort. Right? You feel more comfortable right next to somebody than you would not being next to somebody. Okay? Don't point your finger at people and to draw attention to something. Okay? That's not the appropriate way to do those things in the African culture. So if you want to draw attention to something, you point with your chin. That is common practice. Point your chin in a particular direction. Okay? Don't call somebody with an upward palm. All right? Something about your palm, putting it up towards the sky, directing it back towards you, is inappropriate. It's a violation of the social norm in many African cultures. So if you want to direct somebody, encourage somebody to come towards you, it's palm down, and you take your fingers this direction. Right? This is a more common practice in a lot of African cultures. Don't present the bottom of your shoe towards somebody. So if you're sitting in a social setting, cross your legs, right, and you take the bottom of your foot and you point it towards somebody, that's a sign of disrespect. The bottom of your shoe is the bottom of your feet, barefoot. That's the dirtiest part of your body, and so the idea is that you're communicating, disrespect, that they are not worth, not worth much. You're showing by showing them the bottom of your shoe. Don't worry about showing up on time. Like I mentioned before, social relationships are much more important. Time is relative. If you have like a service that you're going to that starts at 9 o'clock, it may start at 9 o'clock, it may start at 10 o'clock, and it's understood that you're not going to get upset about that, right? You got more opportunities to, have these social relationships with other people, okay? And don't be surprised if you see two young males holding pinkies. This may be more confined to, I believe, regions of West Africa. But I had a student teacher from Eureka College, and he had actually spent about 6 months over in Africa teaching at a private school there. And one thing that he communicated to me that he noticed is at the end of classes, these young males would, on their way out towards the hallway, they would find each other in line, and then their pinkies would interlock with one another, right, on their way out. And so sometimes in our culture we reference that as a particular type of relationship, maybe with two males, homosexuality. But that is, in that particular culture, has no reference to that at all. It's really just a sign of strong friendship, as if they're like best friends with one another, right? So that's common practice in many African cultures as well. Sound good? Does anybody have any questions? Bishop Poltz, do you have a question?
I was going to say that my grandparents used to tell me don't eat with your elbows on the table.
So that's kind of like a common social norm that we have here in our culture, right? That we try to stay away from that. Race, you got one more?
I hear of they said do not eat with your elbows on the table because, that's how how the British would find Americans. They'd eat with their elbows on the table and they'd catch them and send them off back to England.
Is that right? Well, many of the social norms that we have been passed down generationally, right? And we have a strong connection with the British culture or the English culture.